Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Devarim, Tavshin Pei Vav 5786. And Parshas Devarim is the beginning of where Moshe, before he passes away, reviews some of the main stories or incidents that took place 40 years earlier. Right now at this point of time, it's the new generation. Previous generation had died out because of the spies. This is the new generation that's about to enter the land of Israel. And some of the experiences and sins that the Jewish people had years back, Moshe Rabbeinu reviews and goes through them again with the new generation. Now, the first thing that he goes through is the episode that we had back in Parshas Yisro, which is where Moshe establishes a court system. At one point, Moshe was the one taking care of all judgments. And then, at least in Parshas Yisro, it mentions how Yisro saw that everybody was lining up in front of him. He asked what it's about. Moshe Rabbeinu explained. Yisro says to Moshe, it's too much for you, too much for the people, and you need to appoint judges. And Moshe now reviews that part, that story, even though there's no mention of Yisro here. And we will start reading from Perek Aleph, chapter 1, Pasuk Tes, verse 9. V'oimar aleichem v'yisahi leimar, and I said to you at that time, saying, L'uchal avadi se'es eschem, I cannot carry you alone. Hashem Elokeichem hirba eschem, Hashem your God has multiplied you. V'nechem hayem chvei hashamayim l'roiv, and behold, today you are like the stars of the heaven in abundance. Hashem Elokei avoseichem, Hashem the God of your fathers. Yosef aleichem kachem elaf pa'amim. He shall increase you like this 1,000 times more. Bivarech eschem kasher diber lachem, and he shall bless you as he spoke to you. Now, eicha esol avadi, how can I carry on my own? Torchachem u'masa'achem v'rivchem. There are 3 words here. Now, right now, we're going to translate it as the way the Art Scroll does, and Tarchachem, they translate it as your contentiousness, which means you are, you're quarreling or you're problem making of sorts. Umasachem, your loads, v'rivchem, and your quarrels. Havu lachem anashim chachamim nevainim v'duim l'shiftechem. Bring forth men that are wise, understanding, well known to your tribes. V'asimim v'rashechem, I shall place them at your heads. Okay, we're going to focus now on Pasuk Yud Beis, where Moshe says, how can I carry you? Tarchachem, masachem, v'rivchem. 3 things. Tarchachem, which means your load. Umasachem, or tarchachem means your trying to find the right word. Tarchachem, okay, we'll just translate it right now as your burdens, umasachem, and your loads, rivchem, and your quarrels. What are these 3 things exactly? So Ramban Nachmanides explains that Moshe, with these 3 words, is going back on what he responded to Yisro, as we mentioned, that's mentioned previously in the Torah. When Yisro saw that the people were standing there, lining up in front of him, and Yisro says, what are they there for? So Moshe answers 3 things. They're coming to learn Torah. They're coming to hear words of Hashem from me. They are coming for me to pray for them. And they're coming to me to settle their disputes. Those are the 3 things that Moshe responded to Yisro. And that's what these 3 words are referring to. Ramban says, Tarchachem, which again will translate as your trouble or your burden, actually means, and I'm going to read the words of the Ramban here. Ramban explains, Ramaz Moshe Rabbeinu lahem shloisha devarim shomer leYisrael, shehayahu oiseh la'am k'shparashti sham. Moshe is referring to the 3 things that he told Yisro that he was doing for the people. V'izkiran leYisrael beremes, and here he alluded to it when talking to the Jewish people now. Omar tarchachem, he said, your trouble. Keneged v'haidati eschuka l'keves Teresa. That corresponds to when Moshe said, I let them know the laws of God and his teachings. That is called tircha. That is called trouble. Isn't that interesting? Moshe is referring to teaching Torah to the Jewish people as your trouble, or as what was a tircha, what was a trouble, or a the word burden is not a good word, but it means something that took a lot of effort. Ki toirach gadol haya lelamed leyotze Mitzrayim, because it took a lot of work, a lot of effort to teach those who left Egypt, hachukim v'hatayres, the statutes and the teachings, uperusham, and their meaning, and their explanation, ubeurim, and their understanding, visaidam, and their deeper, sounds like secretive meaning. So Moshe, when he says your tarchachem, your burden, that is referring to what was a burden on Moshe. What was the burden on Moshe? Ramban says teaching those who left Egypt was not an easy job. There was a big effort involved. And it's very interesting how this is talking about shortly after they left Egypt. I mean, there's a question, when Yisro came to Moshe, was that before the Torah was given? Was that after the Torah was given? But either way, it's not long after the Jewish people have left Egypt. And already at this point, the Ramban says that Moshe is teaching the Jewish people chukim v'hatayres, statutes and laws, their meaning, their understanding, v'seidam, and their secret, which sounds like a much deeper explanation to them. So there's a lot being taught to them at this very early stage. And he says it was teirach gadol. It took a lot of work. It was a big burden to teach those who left Egypt all these things. Now, I was just wondering, so he seems to be saying it was a big burden teaching these people who left Egypt. I mean, is it always a big effort to teach anybody Torah? Why is he mentioning it was a big tercha? It took a lot of effort to teach those who left Egypt all these things. It sounds like it's something unique to the fact that he's teaching those who left Egypt. And the explanation could well be, if my point is true, is that those who left Egypt, they were the first ones being taught. I mean, these were the first ones being taught on a large scale, Torah. And therefore, being the first ones being taught, the first ones that had to be the first students of the Torah, that alone made it challenging. Or maybe it means the fact that they had just left Egypt as slaves. We know the tribe of Levi was studying Torah. The rest of the Jewish people weren't studying Torah as they were. And therefore, those who left Egypt, their study of Torah was kind of like starting from scratch. It was starting at a point of people who didn't really have a lot of experience with it. And therefore, teaching them Torah was a tircha. It was a big job. Now, maybe the Ramban doesn't mean specifically Yetze Mitzrayim. He just means in general teaching Torah. And he mentions those who left Egypt because that's who he was teaching it to. I don't know. My feeling is that there's something about the fact that he was teaching it to those who left Egypt. But either way, the point is, it's called a big effort to teach Torah. And it was. It was a big effort to teach Torah. And therefore, the word that he says, Tar Chachem, your burden, means your burden means what was a burden on me because of you, which is teaching Torah to them, because it was a big job. There was a lot to teach, and it was to those who left Egypt, so it was a big job. That's the first thing. The next thing is the next word that Moshe says about how can I carry by myself? First, it's your trouble, and then masa achem, your load. What's that referring to? Says Rashi, says the Ramban, v'hiskar masa achem. He mentioned your load, keneged lidrosh elikim. That's corresponding to what Moshe said to Yisro, that the people are coming to me to ask God. Shu inyan tefillah shemispalel aleim. That's referring to prayer that he was praying for them. People came to Moshe to pray for them, for good health, for whatever it may be that they needed. They came to him to pray. Okay, so here Moshe is referring to that, and he's referring to it with the word Masa Achem, your load. It was a load on Moshe to pray on behalf of the Jewish people. And then the last word, Verivchem, your quarrels, is referring to, as the word depicts. The Jewish people had disputes amongst each other. What were they had disputes about exactly? They hadn't left Egypt that long ago. What are they disputing? What are the disputes over exactly that they need to come to Moshe to settle it? I don't know exactly, but clearly there was a need for it. And that's the third thing being mentioned. So when Moshe says, how could I carry the load? How could I carry this job by myself? And therefore, we're going to appoint judges. Moshe says, how could I carry by myself the three things that I did for the Jewish people? Teach them Torah, pray for them, and settle their quarrels. Now, when Moshe Rabbeinu refers to his teaching the Jewish people as Tarchachem, your trouble, your burden, and we say it's referring to teaching them Torah. The word burden sometimes has a negative use that word burden, it's a negative connotation, but it means something that took a lot of effort. Okay, teaching Torah takes a lot of effort. But then Moshe calls his davening for the Jewish people a load. Is that the way you would describe davening for someone, as a load? The Talmud says, it's a Mishnah, I believe, that when praying, if you approach prayer like a burden, that's not a very powerful prayer. That's not going to be a prayer that's going to be accepted that well. So what does Moshe mean when he refers to the fact that his prayer on behalf of the Jewish people was a load? Why use that word? So the answer that I saw, given in the name of Rav Simcha Zisel Breida, he was a Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, was that it's not so much the davening itself that is the load, but how you daven for someone. Because again, Moshe Rabbeinu here is davening for someone else. And when you daven for someone else, you're not just davening for someone else in the sense of, okay, you want me to daven for you? I'll daven for you. But rather, they have a need. You feel their need. They have a burden. They have something that they need. They have something that's troubling them. They need Moshe's prayer. That means that they're in some way, in some kind of pain, in some kind of need. And when Moshe davens for them, it's not just, you come to Moshe, you ask for a prayer, and he, gives you a prayer. It's like a ATM machine for a prayer. Ask for a prayer, prayer comes out. Is that what it is? It's actually Moshe is feeling the burden that person is carrying. He feels it. He feels their pain, and he davens for them. That is how, when you daven for someone else, that is how you should be davening. You should be davening that you're feeling their pain, you're carrying their load, and from that feeling, you pray for them. If that's how you pray, then you can call prayer a masa, a load. Because you're not just praying, you're carrying their burden. And it's with that you're praying. And therefore, it's called a masa, it's called a load. You're carrying something. What are you carrying? You're carrying their pain. You're carrying their emotion. You're carrying their need. You're carrying their feelings. And it's with that you pray. Therefore, it's appropriate to call prayer a masa, a load, because you're carrying something. You're carrying someone else's pain, someone else's need. And just to mention an interesting story, there was a Rosh Yeshiva in Brooklyn, Rav Avram Pam, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha. And Rav Pam, like many other rabbis, had a time where people would come and speak to him about their problems, their needs. And it seems like typically he did this after davening in the morning. That's when he gave time to people. And his wife related that when he would come home for breakfast, he couldn't eat right away. Because all the things that the people spoke to him about, he took it to heart so much that he couldn't eat right away. He had to calm down. And after he calmed down, he'd eat breakfast. Because when a person deals with other people's problems, requests, it's not just, you sit down in front of a person at a desk, you tell them your problem, the complaint department, the request department, and someone dispenses to you an idea or a resolution or an answer. The person who hears your pain is a person that should be answering your question out of feeling your pain, carrying your load, which is what Rav Pam did. He felt people's pain. He didn't just dismiss himself. He didn't just detach himself. On the contrary, he felt the pain. He carried the load, and with that, he responded to them. That is how a great person deals with other people's requests, and that is the way of how every person should actually deal with other people's needs and requests, and that is how we should be approaching davening for someone. Therefore, when Moshe talks about how he prayed for others, he calls it a masa, he calls it a load, he calls it something he's carrying. He didn't just dispense a prayer. He felt their pain, and with that, he prayed on their behalf.
But it looks as any rabbi do the same thing.
You hope so.
But this was three things.
Yep.
To judge, to help people's troubles, and prayer.
Right.
But to him, he was only one.
Right. He was only one for a whole nation.
Yeah, this is what the problem.
Right. That's exactly the point.
But prayer, actually, this is people who, like second generation, they did receive from their father how to pray.
Yeah, but this is Moshe praying for them.
No, but they still have chance to pray for themselves.
Yeah, but they still wanted the Moshe, who is such a great person, daven on their behalf too. And by the way, this is not only talking about the second generation. This is talking about by the first generation. And when Moshe talked about to Yisro, when Moshe spoke to Yisro about appointing judges, this is not something that happened now. It happened when they first left Egypt. Referencing back, correct. Correct. Okay. Now the next thing that Moshe discusses in the parsha is the sin of the spies. He reviews that. And he goes through how the people came and asked for spies, and he gave them the spies. The spies came, they bring back a report, and the Jewish people lost their hope because of the negative report to go into the land of Israel, which there is a lot to talk about, but if you want to kind of give just a very succinct description of what they did wrong, is they lost their trust in Hashem. When they came back with the report that everything is there, they're so strong and they're so mighty and they're so great, and they lost their hope of being able to take the land, that was how they displayed their lack of trust and belief in Hashem's ability to deliver their enemies in their hands. And therefore they complained, they didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, they wanted to go back. And because of that, Hashem said that entire first generation, that entire generation that was present is going to die in the desert, and the next generation will enter the land. The exception is where we need to start talking. And this is going to be Perek Aleph, chapter 1, Pasuk Lamed Vav, verse 36. Zula si Kaleb ben Yefuna, except for Kaleb the son of Yefuna, who Yerena, he's going to see the land. And I shall give him the land upon which he tread, and to his sons. Yan Ashamila Yachrei Hashem, because he wholeheartedly went after Hashem. Meaning, when everybody else was giving up their trust in Hashem, he was the first one to get up and say that no, we will be able to take the land because Hashem will give it to us. Now Moshe says something very surprising. Gam biyas anaf Hashem biglalchem leimar. Also against me, Hashem became angry because of you. Leimar saying, Gamata leisav Hashem, you also shall not come there. Yoshua ben Nun ha'emed lefanecha, Yeshua the son of Nun who stands before you, Hu Yavai Shama, he shall come there. Oisei Chazek, strengthen him, Huyan Chilanas Yisrael, because he will give the land to the Jewish people to take possession of. So Moshe is talking about the sin of the spies. He mentions everybody's going to die, not going to make it to the land. Kalev is the exception. And Hashem got angry at me also because of you, saying, Hashem is saying to Moshe, you also shall not come there. Now, what does this mean? It sounds like that Hashem got angry at Moshe because of the sin of the spies. That's what it sounds like. If you just read the words talk about the sin of the spies, and Moshe says, and Hashem got angry at me also because of you, which in just looking at the context, it would seem like from the sin of the spies. And Yeshua also is an exception, and he will enter the land. Now, if I were to ask you, why did Moshe not enter the land of Israel? What's the answer? Because he hit the rock instead of speaking to it. So why is he bringing that in here?
But this is like statement between Caleb and Joshua is not clear why between.
That's a good point too. That's a good point. But right now, let's focus on the point as to why is Moshe bringing this in here? That's not the discussion. Discussion is the sin of the spies, right? Moshe had his sin for which he didn't enter. Why is he bringing it in here? And what does it mean? What's it doing here? So Ramban, Nachmanides explains, is that Moshe doing here he was basically putting together everything that the Jewish people had basically done to cause themselves and others not to enter the land of Israel. They sinned by the spies. Kalev was the exception. Moshe says, because of you, I also couldn't enter the land. Now, because of you doesn't mean the sin of the spies. It means because they had been complaining about the water. That caused Moshe to be angry and to hit the rock. And therefore, they also were the cause of not entering the land. And because Moshe is not taking them into the land, who is going to take them into the land? Yoshua, who also, like Kalev, right, stood up against everybody else, which was why he was able to enter the land. But according to the Ramban, the point here is to discuss the Jewish people causing those who couldn't enter the land of Israel. They did it to themselves for the sin of the spies. They did it to Moshe by the rock. And because of the fact that Moshe couldn't enter the land, who was now going to take the people in? Yoshua, because he, like Kalev, were trusted in Hashem. Didn't lose their trust in Hashem. That's the Ramban's explanation.
But remember, this is what is written here, like he does not agree with Hashem.
No. You don't have to read it that way. He's just saying,
what is it because of you?
Yeah, that's the point. You were the cause. Your actions were the cause. Your actions were the cause why you didn't enter the land, and your actions were the cause why I didn't enter the land. Moshe is not saying that he's justified for what he did. But Moshe Rabbeinu, again, is rebuking the Jewish people that their lack of their trust in Hashem brought about those who could not enter the land. Now, I want to tell you another explanation. Very interesting explanation from the Arachayim. Okay? So you got to hold on to a couple of points we have to keep in mind here. Now, what was the date of when the spies came back and then the Jewish people were crying about that they're not going to be able to enter the land, I'm going to go back to Egypt? When did that happen? What was the date?
Was I back?
Yeah. Or when they cried about after the report. What day was that? What's the date? Go ahead, Martin.
I'm listening.
Go wait. Come on, answer the question. You know the answer.
Is the Torah told us what is the day?
Nope. Talmud does. Mishnah tells us. Tisha B'Av.
What?
Tisha B'Av. The Mishnah says.
But Tisha B'Av happens later.
It's still the same date. The 9th day of Av. Right? Tisha B'Av means the 9th of Av.
How do we know it was Tisha B'Av?
Mishnah says that. Mishnah says. And actually, and the Talmud elaborates and says that when the Jewish people were crying on that night, Hashem says to them, you're crying in vain, and because of this, you're going to have what to cry about. Which means that the sin of the spies was the foundation, was the beginning, was the foundation for eventually the sins that caused destruction of the Beis
The
HaMikdash.
same day we'll cry again.
Right. Now, the Gemara in Sota tells us a very interesting thing. The Gemara in Sota says that if Moshe Rabbeinu would have entered the land, and let's remember, Hashem told him, you can't enter the land. Next week's parsha, we're going to read how Moshe begged God to allow him to go in, meaning to rescind the decree and let him go in. So the Talmud says, if Moshe would have gone into the land of Israel, he would have built the Beis HaMikdash, right? He would have built the Beis HaMikdash. And if he would have built the Beis HaMikdash, it could never have been destroyed. The Talmud says, if Moshe built the Beis HaMikdash, then the holiness that he would put into the Beis HaMikdash, because it's him, Beis HaMikdash can never be destroyed. Okay, so right now, the sin of the spies is the cause of destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. If Moshe Rabbeinu enters the land and builds the Beis HaMikdash, can't be destroyed. Third thing is a medrash. There's a pasuk that we actually say it on the night that it's one of the Tehillims that we say during the week. Mizmar la'asef Elokim boy goy b'nachal asecha timur seichalecha. I think that's the words. Now, Asaph was a prophet, and some of the psalms that we have were not from Devarim, from King David, but they were from Asaph. And the word Mizmar means a song to Asaph, meaning Asaph composed the song. How did the song go? Hashem, the nations have entered, the nations have entered your heritage. They have made your sanctuary impure. That's a song? That's not a song. That should be called a kinah, a lamentation. The Medrash asks that. Mizmar la'asaf, it's a song to Asaf? What kind of song? And the Gemara answers, you know what the song is? The song is that because the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, that's how the Jewish people survived. Meaning, at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, it was either the Jewish people or it was the Beis HaMikdash that had to go. One of the two. And the kindness that Hashem did with the Jewish people was to destroy the Beis HaMikdash and allow them to survive. That's why it's called a mizmar. That's why it's called a song. Okay? So now, if we put all these three things together, when Moshe Rabbeinu was saying like this, you sin by the spies. Because you sin by the spies, then that means that there's going to be a destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. That means the future is not going to be good. That means that the future of the Jewish people, meaning if they already sinned now, their sin now by the spies was going to now have repercussions for the future, a future of sins that would cause destruction of Beis HaMikdash. Okay? If Moshe enters the land, Beis HaMikdash can't be destroyed. If the Beis HaMikdash is not destroyed, then who's going to be destroyed? Jewish people. Therefore, Moshe says, because of you, meaning because of you here, in the sin of the spies, that already meant that Hashem would be angry at me and not allow me to enter the land.
To save Jewish people.
Right. It was already from the sin of the spies, it came out that Moshe could not that would not be able to get into the land. Also, at me, Hashem became angry means that at this point, it was going to be that I would not be able to enter the land. Which means that when Moshe Rabbeinu would sin by the Mei Meriva, Moshe Rabbeinu was, now again, that whole sin of the Mei Meriva, of the war, when he hit the rock, lots of discussion. What did he do wrong exactly? I mean, the Rishonim all talk about, what did he do wrong? Or what did he do wrong so bad? I mean, Rashi says, Tar Pasuk says, Hashem says, you didn't believe in me, you didn't sanctify me. Moshe Rabbeinu still prays that it should be rescinded. But that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen because once the Jewish people sinned by the spies, which means there's going to be a destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Moshe can't enter the land. Because if he enters the land, then the Beis HaMikdash can't be destroyed. And who's going to be destroyed? The Jewish people. If they wouldn't have sinned by the spies, the Jewish people would have retained their belief in Hashem, their trust in Hashem. They would have retained their spiritual level. Then that would have carried over for the future. They would have carried over for a future that there would be no Beis HaMikdash, there would be no destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and then Moshe could enter the land and build the Beis HaMikdash. But once you're the sin of the spies, that already was going to be the foundation, that already bode that there's going to be a difficult future for the Jewish people, because in their starting point in the desert, they were not giving themselves a strong enough foundation, so that later on there would be the sins that would cause destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And if so, Moshe can't enter the land. Because if he does, and he builds the Beis Hamikdash, then the Beis Hamikdash can't be destroyed, and the Jewish people have to be destroyed. So therefore, says the Arachayim, when here Moshe says, because of me, Hashem became angry because of you. And the context of the pasuk seems to be because of the sin of the spies. Yeah, it is because of the sin of the spies. Because once in the sin of the spies, Hashem would be angry at me to the point that he would never allow me to go back to the land, go into the land of Israel. Because if that would happen, that would mean the ultimate destruction of the base of the Jewish people. And therefore, out of his mercy for the Jewish people, Moshe, already from the point of the spies, it was already determined that Moshe couldn't enter the land.
Wow.
Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful evening.
I never heard of this idea.
I heard this idea. You know when I heard this idea? I don't know why he did this, but I am pretty sure in 7th grade, that don't be impressed, because there's certain things that stick with you from when you're a child. But one of my rebbeim, he taught us this idea.